So 56%.
Yeah, that's the number.
I mean, think about that for a second. Over half of the global chief executives operating today, they've poured millions of dollars, tens of thousands of engineering hours, and just endless boardroom capital into artificial intelligence over the last 2 years.
Right, a massive allocation of resources.
Exactly. And they have absolutely zero financial benefit to show for it.
None at all.
Like no margin expansion, no new revenue streams, just nothing. Yet at the exact same time, you have this tiny fraction of their competitors using the exact same fundamental technology who are basically rewiring the global economy.
It's wild. It really is the ultimate paradox of the current business cycle.
Yeah.
We're watching an adoption curve that basically looks like a vertical cliff face.
Right.
But the majority of the climbers are they're just throwing their money into a void.
Which brings us to the mission of today's deep dive. We are figuring out how to get you, the listener, out of that failing 56%.
Exactly. Because everyone from your board of directors to your newest interns expects you to have a bulletproof strategy for this technology.
But building a strategy when the ground is moving beneath your feet feels impossible, right?
It does. And the antidote to that paralysis, really, the only way to manage your fiduciary duty right now is relentless, continuous learning.
Because the technology is changing faster than any tool in human history, which means your intuition has to adapt just as fast.
Right. And to build that intuition, we are unpacking a really fascinating document today.
Yeah. The Disruptor's Guide to Artificial Intelligence. 40 questions every CEO is asking about AI.
Version 1.3, specifically published in July 2026. And what makes this guide so invaluable is just the sheer density of its sourcing.
It's massive.
It really is. It compiles data from over 60 distinct institutional sources. PwC, IBM, EY, McKinsey, Stanford, alongside direct statements from the primary architects at the tech giants who are actually building these models.
But there is a meta detail about this guide that we have to call out immediately.
Oh, we absolutely do.
Because it proves the exact point we're making about capabilities here. The publisher of this guide, Justin White, he includes a transparency note on page 1.
Yeah, this is the crazy part.
Right. This 40-question, heavily cited, deeply analytical executive guide. It was completely researched, compiled, structured, and written by an AI model.
It's just a profound demonstration of the frontier we're at.
I mean, how did he even do that?
Well, White directed the model for close to a year. He basically acted as the managing editor. He was setting the standards, demanding revisions, running independent fact checks. But the actual cognitive labor of synthesizing 60 massive corporate reports into a cohesive narrative, that was executed by a machine.
Wow.
Yeah. And he notes that anyone publishing AI-generated material at this level, they owe the reader that disclosure.
I mean, I appreciate the transparency, but it also sends a bit of a chill down my spine,
How so?
Well, if a machine can synthesize that level of strategic analysis, the immediate question every leader is asking is, are we looking at a fundamental shift in human economics? Or just like the mother of all financial bubbles?
Right, the hype cycle.
Because I look at the valuations of some of these tech companies and I see major echoes of the dot-com crash in 2000.
Well, the guide tackles that exact anxiety right out of the gate. And the consensus from the data is a very firm both.
Wait, both?
Yeah, it is a massive financial bubble and it is a fundamental rewiring of the economy simultaneously.
I struggle to see how it can be both. I mean, if the valuations crash, the capital dries up and the deployment just stops, right?
Not necessarily. You have to think about the distinction Jeff Bezos made at Italian Tech Week in late 2025.
Okay, what did he say?
He called this an industrial bubble as opposed to a purely financial one. Yeah. And Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, he openly admitted that investors are completely overexcited right now. He said smart people get overexcited about a kernel of truth. So the valuations of individual software wrappers or, specific hardware vendors might absolutely implode.
But the underlying capability curve is concrete.
Exactly.
Because the infrastructure is actually being built. It's like during the dot-com bust, companies like Pets.com vanished, but the fiber optic cables in the ground stayed there.
Right, and they enabled Web 2.0.
But the capital numbers here are still just staggering to me.
Oh, they are. I mean, the Stanford AI Index for 2026 reported global corporate AI investment hit $581.7 billion the year prior.
That's insane.
It is. But more importantly, the St. Louis Fed estimated that AI-associated investments, so data centers, specialized silicon, software research, they accounted for roughly 39% of U.S. GDP growth in the first 9 months of 2025.
Wait, 39%?
Yeah. You do not generate nearly 40% of the nation's economic growth on a pure mirage.
But Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan, he actually lived through that dot-com bubble. And he made a distinction in the guide that I think captures the mechanism of why this is so different.
Right, the quote about data.
Yeah. He said, past manias move data. This one does the thinking.
That is the mechanical reality right there. TCP/IP, the cloud, mobile networks, they were revolutionary, sure. But functionally, they were just increasingly faster pipes for transmitting human-generated information.
Like if you send a spreadsheet, the network didn't understand the spreadsheet.
Exactly, it's just move the bytes. Generative AI actually performs the cognitive inferencing. It synthesizes, it translates codes and reasons. It is a completely different paradigm, which is why the adoption speed is breaking all historical precedents.
Let's talk about that speed for a second, because the guide states that 3 years after ChatGPT launched, 54.6% of U.S. adults aged 18 to 64 were using generative tools.
Yep.
I read that and immediately pushed back. It feels inflated to me.
I get that. It sounds inflated until you realize how embedded it is becoming in daily consumer workflows, from search to mobile operating systems.
I guess that's true.
But the St. Louis Fed put that 54.6% into historical context. 3 years into their respective life cycles, only 30.1% of adults were using the internet.
Wow.
And a mere 19.7% were using personal computers. We are adopting cognitive automation faster than we adopted the graphical user interface.
Which means we need to get incredibly precise with our terminology, because leaders are just throwing around terms like AI and agents as if they're interchangeable.
Yeah, they really do.
And mechanically, they're completely different things.
They absolutely are. We can kind of skip the legacy definition of AI, like the basic machine learning and predictive algorithms that have recommended movies on Netflix or routed logistics for 20 years.
Right. Everyone understands pattern recognition by now.
Exactly. The real leap was generative AI, the post-2022 models that generate novel text, images, and code on demand. But the absolute bleeding edge right now, the frontier that is confusing everyone, is agentic AI.
So generative AI is like a brilliant chef who can invent any recipe you want if you stand in the kitchen and ask for it. But agentic AI, what is the mechanical difference there?
Agentic AI is giving that chef the keys to the restaurant, a corporate credit card, and the authority to order ingredients, hire sous chefs, and serve the food without you ever walking into the kitchen.
Okay, that is a great analogy.
Amazon's Andy Jassy defines agents as software systems that take multi-step actions toward a goal on behalf of users. They don't just output a string of text.
Right, they actually do things.
Yes, they break a complex goal down into subtasks. They use external tools like opening a web browser, executing code, or querying a database. They evaluate their own progress, and they trigger real-world workflows.
That sounds incredibly powerful, but it also sounds like a massive vulnerability. I mean, if I'm a buyer for an enterprise and every vendor is suddenly slapping an agentic AI sticker on their software, how do I know what's real?
You are hitting on one of the most urgent warnings in the entire guide right now. Gartner calls it agent washing.
Like greenwashing.
Exactly like greenwashing in corporate sustainability.
Yeah.
Vendors take a standard legacy automation script, wrap an LLM chatbot interface around it, and try to sell it as an autonomous agent.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Gartner analyzed thousands of vendors claiming to offer agentic AI and found only about 130 of them possessed legitimate, autonomous, multi-step reasoning capabilities.
So the vast majority of the market is essentially selling snake oil right now.
Completely.
Yeah.
And because leaders are buying into the hype without understanding the underlying mechanics, Gartner predicts that over 40% of agentic AI projects will be canceled outright by 2027.
40%.
Yeah, the models will fail to execute complex tasks, they'll get stuck in loops, and the enterprise will just have to pull the plug.
But for the legitimate models, the ones actually built by the frontier labs, how fast is the reasoning capability actually advancing? Because if I'm planning a 3-year roadmap, I need to know what the software will be capable of in 2028.
For that, we have to look at the METR benchmarks.
The MTR?
Yeah, METR is an independent research group that evaluates the autonomous capabilities of frontier models. They measure the length of time a generalist model can sustain an autonomous task with 50% reliability.
Okay.
For the last 6 years, that duration has been doubling, approximately every 7 months.
So a task that took 10 minutes for a model to complete autonomously last year.
Now it takes 20 minutes, and soon will be an hour. And METR projects that week-long autonomous tasks are entirely plausible within a few years. We are moving from micro-task automation to sustained cognitive labor.
This naturally leads us to the most radioactive debate in the entire field, artificial general intelligence, or AGI.
Oh, absolutely.
Human-level intelligence across all economic and cognitive domains. The guide attempts to pin down a timeline for this, and it reveals a massive, fundamental fracture among the smartest people on Earth.
A huge fracture.
Yeah.
It's really between the engineers building the models and the scientists studying the fundamental architecture of machine learning.
Okay, lay it out for me.
If you ask the builders, AGI is basically next Tuesday.
Right.
Dario Amodei, the CEO of Anthropic, predicts a country of geniuses in a data center could arrive between 2026 and 2027, and almost certainly by 2030. Demis Hassabis at Google DeepMind says 5 to 10 years.
But I'm assuming the researchers looking at the actual math are pumping the brakes.
Slamming on the brakes. The AAI, which is the premier professional association for AI researchers, they polled nearly 500 of their members in 2025.
And what did they say?
76% of them stated that simply scaling up our current methods, just feeding more data and compute into autoregressive large language models, is highly unlikely to ever produce AGI.
Wait, explain the mechanism there. Why wouldn't just making the supercomputer bigger make it smarter?
Because of how the current architecture actually works. Yann LeCun, Meta's chief AI scientist and a Turing Award winner, he argues that LLMs are fundamentally just predicting the next token in a sequence.
Right, the autocomplete on steroids analogy?
Exactly. They do not possess a persistent memory of the world, they do not have a physical intuition of reality, and they cannot perform hierarchical planning the way a mammalian brain does.
So it's a structural limitation.
Yes. LeCun argues that no matter how many trillions of words you feed a next token predictor, it hits a hard wall in abstract reasoning.
So as a leader planning an operating budget, the takeaway isn't to stockpile cash waiting for a digital super CEO to emerge in 2027.
Definitely not.
It's to plan for continuous, aggressive gains in specific task automation while basically ignoring the religious debates about consciousness.
Precisely. And the guide breaks down those debates into 4 live fights that are currently raging in the industry. The first is what we just discussed, the architectural limits of scaling.
Okay, what's the second fight?
The job apocalypse. Amodei warns that up to 50% of junior white-collar roles could evaporate in 5 years. Meanwhile, Jensen Huang at NVIDIA publicly states he disagrees with almost everything Amodei predicts on the labor front.
Wow, okay. And the third fight?
Existential risk. The literal extinction of humanity.
Nothing major, then.
Right. Jeffrey Hinton, one of the foundational architects of deep learning, currently estimates a 10 to 20% probability that AI leads to human extinction within 30 years.
And LeCun.
LeCun, his peer, calls that mathematically absurd and completely overblown.
Okay, so we have the brightest minds in the world arguing over whether this technology will end civilization, destroy the middle class, or just hit a computational wall. Is there anything they actually agree on?
Yes.
Yeah.
The fourth point. It is the one unified consensus across all 60 sources in the guide. From the doomers to the optimists to the economists, 0 people dispute that AI will fundamentally and permanently transform the global economy.
No dissenters.
None. The friction is entirely about the mechanics and the timeline. But nobody believes the way we work today survives the decade.
Which brings us to the most urgent contradiction in this entire deep dive. If every genius and every economist agrees this is a total economic transformation, why are 56% of CEOs seeing 0 return on their investment?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right. Where is the money going and why is it vanishing?
It vanishes in the transition from theoretical capability to actual workflow integration. The guide asks a very pointed question. Do I need a separate AI strategy? Or is AI just part of my business strategy now?
And the data says?
The data is ruthless. The winners embed the technology into their core operating model. The losers silo it in an innovation lab.
Break down the mechanics of that failure for me. Because if I'm a CEO, I naturally want to set up an AI task force. I give them a budget, I tell them to buy some enterprise licenses for ChatGPT, and I ask them to find efficiencies. Why does that fail?
Because a standalone AI program, divorced from the profit and loss statement, doesn't change how the company makes money. Remember the PwC survey we talked about? Only 12% of those 4,400 CEOs are seeing both cost reductions and revenue growth.
Just 12%.
Yeah. And McKinsey's data shows that those high performers are 3 times more likely to have fundamentally redesigned their core workflows. They didn't just give a copywriter an AI tool, they completely re-engineered the supply chain of how marketing copy is generated, approved, and published.
But let me challenge that. Redesigning a core workflow takes time. It takes quarters, maybe years. Right now, there is massive FOMO fear of missing out in the executive ranks.
Huge FOMO.
IBM found that 64% of CDOs admit they are investing in AI before they even understand its value, simply because they are terrified of falling behind. If the technology is moving this fast, isn't it better to be fast and wrong than perfectly slow and obsolete?
It definitely feels that way, but the empirical evidence proves the exact opposite. IBM also found that behind closed doors, the most successful CEOs prioritize being right and slow. Depth of integration beats speed of deployment.
Okay, give me an example.
Well, the guide highlights a preliminary MIT study called the Gen AI Divide, which looked at enterprise pilots. A staggering 95% of internal task-specific AI pilots delivered zero measurable P&L impact.
95%. How do you even achieve a failure rate that high?
Because of the build versus buy illusion and the baseline problem. Let's look at the build versus buy first. The MIT study found that externally purchased AI tools like buying an off-the-shelf solution from a vendor reached successful, profitable deployment twice as often as internal builds.
See, I would think building it internally gives you a custom fit and better margins.
In theory, yes. In practice, building a custom AI model requires a density of engineering talent, data infrastructure, and continuous maintenance that most non-tech enterprises completely underestimate.
Oh, so it just becomes a money pit.
Exactly. Model drift occurs. The underlying foundation models update and break your custom architecture, and suddenly your IT budget is consumed by maintenance, not deployment.
So you're just fixing bugs all day.
Right. The lead author of the MIT study, Aditya Chalapalli, was blunt about it. The winners pick one pain point, execute it well, and partner smartly. Unless selling AI is your actual core product, you should not be building it from scratch.
But if I partner with a vendor and buy an off-the-shelf AI tool, I run into the trap that Satya Nadella warned about.
Oh, the double payment trap.
Yeah, the Microsoft CEO basically said that if you outsource all the cognitive work, you have to fiercely protect your data layer, or you end up paying twice.
That is the tightrope you have to walk. Nadella warned that if you hand a vendor your data and allow them to train their models on your proprietary workflows without retaining ownership, you pay them once in subscription fees, and you pay them again by giving them the intelligence they need to sell a better product to your competitors.
You essentially train your replacement.
Exactly. You become hopelessly locked in.
Huh.
You must own your data layer so you can swap out the AI vendor whenever a better model emerges.
Okay, so if I am buying, not building, and I'm protecting my data, where exactly is the highest ROI right now? What specific departments are actually driving that $3.70 return on every dollar invested that Microsoft's IDC study claimed?
The returns are heavily clustered in 4 specific zones: customer service, IT and software engineering, back office administration like finance and document processing and marketing content generation.
Let's get granular on that. Give me the mechanics of a customer service deployment.
Look at Salesforce. Mark Benioff noted that their internal support headcount dropped from roughly 9,000 down to 5,000.
Wow, almost in half.
Right, but they didn't just fire 4,000 people. They used agentic AI to absorb the Tier 1 support tickets, the password resets, the basic troubleshooting. Attrition naturally reduced the headcount, and they redeployed the remaining human agents to high-value, complex client relationship management.
But the MIT study gives a massive warning about the marketing side, don't they? They noted that over half of enterprise AI budgets are being thrown at flashy marketing and sales generation tools, but the real margin is hidden in the boring stuff.
Exactly. Every CEO loves a demo where the AI writes a beautiful email campaign in 10 seconds. It looks like magic.
Right.
But the unglamorous back-office work invoice reconciliation, compliance checking, sorting unstructured legal documents, that is where the massive operational drag exists. Applying AI to those boring high-volume processes yields incredible cost savings.
Which brings us to the core reason why 95% of pilots fail. It is the baseline problem.
Yes, this is crucial.
If I deploy a tool to speed up invoice processing, why wouldn't I see that on the P&L?
Because you probably didn't know your pre-AI cost to begin with. The consistent finding across PwC, IBM, and McKinsey is that organizations fail to show ROI because they never established a baseline metric.
Like they didn't know where they started.
Exactly. If a manager doesn't know the exact cost per ticket in customer service, or the precise cycle time to draft a proposal before the AI is deployed, it is mathematically impossible to prove the AI improved it.
You can't prove a delta if you don't have a starting point. It's a failure of basic management, not a failure of the algorithm.
Precisely. McKinsey's review stated this perfectly. It's not about the agent, it's about the workflow. The AI pilot fails because there is no baseline, no mandate to actually change the human process around the AI, and no executive sponsor holding the line manager accountable for the P&L impact.
So how should a company structure its spending to avoid this? I know Gartner is forecasting global AI spending to hit $2.59 trillion by 2026. What percentage of my digital budget should actually go to this?
Well, among the elite 6% of companies that attribute real EBIT impacts, so earnings, before interest and taxes, to their AI efforts, McKinsey found that more than a third of them commit over 20% of their entire digital budget to AI.
20% is a massive reallocation of capital.
It is, but the tactical advice for the listener is not to just dump 20% of your budget onto the CIO's desk and demand an AI revolution. The secret is sequencing.
Sequencing, okay.
You pick a single, highly measurable workflow. You establish the baseline. You deploy the tool. You measure the cost and revenue delta. You only scale the budget to the next workflow once the first pilot definitively proves its return.
That makes strategic sense. But strategy is completely useless if the people on the ground refuse to execute it.
Oh, absolutely.
Which is where the guide pivots from the balance sheet to the psychology of the workforce. Because the biggest friction point in AI deployment isn't an API integration, it is the human being staring at the screen, terrified for their livelihood.
The fear of replacement is the shadow hanging over every corporate deployment right now. Every employee is silently calculating their own obsolescence, and leaders have to address it head on.
And once again, the credible voices completely diverge on the reality of job losses. We have Dario Amodei forecasting a potential 50% loss in junior white-collar roles. Amazon's Andy Jassy explicitly stating that certain coding and support functions will simply require fewer humans.
But then you zoom out to the macroeconomic modeling, and the World Economic Forum projects a net global gain of 78 million jobs by 2030. They forecast 170 million new roles created against 92 million displaced.
How does that math work mechanically? If the AI is doing the work of 10 people, how do we end up with more jobs?
Because AI doesn't exist in a vacuum. That WEF projection includes massive macro shifts like the green energy transition, demographic aging requiring more healthcare workers, and the explosion of specialized data and governance rules.
Okay, but what about inside the companies actually using AI?
Even looking strictly at AI-exposed companies, PwC's 2026 jobs barometer found something incredibly counterintuitive. Companies with the highest exposure to AI actually grew their headcount by 52%, compared to only 36% growth in the least exposed sectors.
Wait, if they are highly exposed to automation, why are they hiring faster?
Because of the productivity elasticity of demand.
Say that again?
Productivity elasticity of demand. If an engineering firm uses AI to cut the cost of structural analysis by 40%, they don't necessarily fire 40% of their engineers.
Right.
They win more bids, take on vastly more projects, and suddenly need to hire more project managers and quality assurance experts to handle the increased volume. Mark Benioff pointed this out when he said he keeps asking other CEOs, what AI are you actually using for these big layoffs?
It reminds me of the invention of spreadsheet software in the 1980s. Everyone panicked that Microsoft Excel and Lotus 1-2-3 were going to annihilate the accounting profession.
Exactly.
And they did destroy the jobs of people whose only skill was manually adding columns of numbers. But the accountants who learned Excel became strategic analysts, and the profession exploded in size.
It is the exact same dynamic. The dividing line isn't the job title. It is the tasks comprising the job. Microsoft analyzed hundreds of thousands of Copilot interactions to map the exposure. The highest exposure is in language, information sorting, and desk-bound synthesis. Interpreters, copywriters, basic customer service reps.
And the least exposed are the roles requiring physical, dynamic interaction in the real world. Field service, tradespeople, equipment operators.
Right. But PwC noted that in the roles where AI serves to amplify expert human judgment rather than just automate, a routine task job growth is twice as fast, and the salary premium is 42% higher.
So the mandate for a CEO is not to initiate a blanket hiring freeze. Toby Lipke, the CEO of Shopify, established a brilliantly aggressive standard for this.
I love his approach.
He issued a mandate that before any team leader can request additional headcount, they must empirically prove why an AI model cannot perform the required work.
You literally have to prove the negative. You have to show where the AI fails before you get approval to hire a human. It forces managers to deeply understand the limits of the models,
Right.
rather than just defaulting to traditional hiring.
It forces continuous learning. But you pair that with IBM's finding that 54% of CEOs are actively hiring for AI-specific roles that did not exist 12 months ago. You throttle the hiring on routine cognitive labor, and you aggressively accelerate hiring for judgment, governance, and AI orchestration.
Exactly.
Let's talk about the people currently sitting in the cubicles, though. How do you get them to adopt the tools? Because I hear executives complain constantly that they bought enterprise licenses and nobody is using them.
That is the great illusion. The executives think nobody is using the AI. The reality is that the employees are using it constantly, and they're lying to their bosses about it.
The shadow AI crisis.
Yes. McKinsey found that employees are 3 times more likely to be heavy AI users than their leaders realize. And Avanti survey data shows that anywhere from a third to over half of workers actively conceal their usage from management.
Mechanically, why would you hide the fact that you are hyperproductive?
Out of rational self-preservation. Imagine a financial analyst who used to take 4 hours to write a quarterly variance report. They figure out a workflow using Claude that gets a solid first draft done in 30 minutes. If they tell their boss, what happens?
The boss says, great, you now have to write 8 reports a day for the exact same salary. Or worse, the boss realizes they only need 1 analyst instead of 3, and 2 people get fired.
Exactly. The employee hides the usage to protect their time, or because they view their AI proficiency as a secret competitive advantage over their peers. They hoard the prompts.
So how do you break that?
To break this cycle, Brooke Johnson, the chief legal counsel at Avanti, says employers must assume shadow usage is rampant. The only fix is explicit, documented permission from the C-suite that using AI is sanctioned, providing secure enterprise-grade tools, and ensuring employees that efficiency gains will be rewarded, not punished with layoffs.
BCG summarizes this perfectly. AI adoption is 10% algorithms, 20% technology, and 70% people and process. This is a behavioral psychology challenge wearing a technology costume.
Which is why the corporate structure around AI is shifting so fast. IBM found that 76% of large organizations now have a designated chief AI officer, up from just 26% a year prior.
Does a mid-market company really need a CAIO, though? That feels like title inflation.
Gartner agrees with you. For the mid-market, the title is irrelevant. What matters is accountability. You need an empowered cross-functional owner, someone who can command IT, legal, and HR simultaneously. Vistage data shows that CEO-sponsored AI initiatives are 5 times more likely to achieve significant ROI, simply because the CEO can break through the silos that a mid-level manager cannot.
So we have an executive sponsor. We have given the employees permission to come out of the shadows. Now we have to upskill them. And the financial incentive for the employee is massive. PwC's June 2026 Jobs Barometer found a 62% wage premium for workers demonstrating advanced AI skills.
It's huge.
But how do you actually train an entire workforce on a tool that updates every 3 weeks?
You absolutely do not do it with traditional corporate training. McKinsey found that 70% of workers completely ignore passive training videos.
I mean, we've all done it. You click play on the compliance video, you mute the tab, and you go back to answering emails.
Exactly. AI is fundamentally experiential. You cannot learn to prompt by watching a PowerPoint. You learn by doing. The most successful upskilling playbooks start by isolating the middle managers. BCG cited a Fortune 500 company that ran an intensive hands-on training program exclusively for their managers. Following that, overall team AI usage jumped 89%.
So you train the managers first.
Right. You give them the tools, you mandate dedicated experimentation time during paid hours, and you establish peer learning channels like an internal Slack channel where people just share the prompts that worked for them today. As Jensen Huang famously said, you aren't going to lose your job to AI. You're going to lose it to another human who uses AI better than you do.
I want to focus on a demographic trend in the guide that feels like a slow-moving catastrophe. Section 3 concludes with a look at the talent pipeline. Stanford researchers analyzed ADP payroll data representing millions of workers. What did the data show about the entry level?
It showed a severe hollowing out of the bottom rung. Employment in AI-exposed early career occupations has fallen sharply since the launch of ChatGPT. At the exact same time, older, highly experienced workers in those identical occupations saw their employment grow by 6 to 9%.
Anish Raman from LinkedIn wrote about this in the New York Times, warning that the bottom rung of the career ladder is breaking. And mechanically, this is an existential threat to the long-term survival of any knowledge-based firm.
Because it destroys the apprenticeship model.
Exactly. Think about a law firm or an architectural practice. A senior partner is incredibly valuable because of their judgment, but they develop that judgment by spending 5 years as a junior associate, doing the miserable, grinding work of document review or basic CAD drafting.
Yeah.
If you use an AI agent to do 80% of the junior drafting, you don't need to hire the junior associate. But if you never hire the junior associate, where do you find a mid-level manager in 5 years?
You don't. You face a catastrophic talent cliff. The guide insists that leaders cannot just automate the bottom of the pyramid and expect the top to remain structurally sound. You have to deliberately redesign entry-level roles. If the AI is doing the rote drafting, the junior employee must be transitioned into a supervisory role earlier, reviewing the AI's output, sitting in on client meetings, and developing high-level judgment faster than they historically would have.
So we have aligned the strategy, and we have navigated the psychology of the team. Now we have to actually deploy the software without blowing up the company's data architecture. The guide asks the most practical question possible. Where do I start if my company has done almost nothing with AI?
First, realize you are not alone. Despite the deafening hype, McKinsey data reveals that only 1% of companies consider their own AI deployment to be mature.
1%. So if a CEO is listening to this feeling like they have missed the boat, they are actually in the 99% majority.
The gap between being a laggard and being at the industry median is literally just one well-executed workflow. The MIT interviews provide a precise step-by-step playbook for starting from zero.
Okay, walk me through the playbook.
Step 1. Identify a single, highly painful, highly measurable process. Do not pick a complex, multi-departmental strategy. Pick invoice follow-ups or translating technical manuals.
Be a bit simple.
Step 2. Buy a proven, off-the-shelf enterprise tool. Step 3. Put a line manager from the affected business unit in charge of the deployment. Do not let the IT department own the business outcome.
And when it comes to picking that off-the-shelf tool, the market is incredibly noisy. We have ChatGPT, Anthropic's Claude, Google's Gemini, Microsoft Copilot. How does a leader choose?
The guide cites Ethan Mollick from Wharton, who is arguably the most pragmatic voice on executive AI adoption. His advice is refreshing. Stop stressing over which model is inherently best. By mid-2026, all the major frontier models are highly capable. The choice should be driven by ecosystem fit, not benchmark worship.
Break down the ecosystem mechanics for me.
If your entire company already runs on Microsoft 365 Teams, SharePoint, Azure, the frictionless choice is Copilot, because it already has access to your data graph. If you run on Google Workspace, Gemini makes sense. Claude is heavily favored by developers and for complex, nuanced writing tasks. ChatGPT maintains the strongest consumer familiarity.
To just pick the path of least resistance.
Mollick's core advice is to pick one frontier family on a paid enterprise tier contract, mandate fluency across your team, and stick with it. Do not force your IT department to switch vendors every time a competitor releases a minor update.
But you mentioned the enterprise tier contract, and that is the linchpin for the biggest deployment roadblock data readiness. Gartner projects that an astonishing 60% of AI projects will be abandoned through 2026, specifically due to a lack of AI-ready data. What does AI-ready actually mean in a mechanical sense?
It does not mean building a flawless billion-dollar data lake spanning your entire global enterprise. Gartner's Roxane Edgelali frames it relative to the specific use case.
Yeah.
If you want an AI agent to draft responses to customer emails, is the historical customer data representative? Is it deduplicated? Is the CRM clean?
And most importantly,
is it properly governed with permission tags?
explain the permission tags, because this is where companies get into massive trouble.
If you unleash an enterprise search agent across your company's servers, it will read everything it has access to. If your HR department hasn't properly restricted the folder containing executive compensation or upcoming layoff plans, the AI will happily summarize that data for any junior employee who asks a vaguely related question.
Oh, wow. So it just bypasses the human silos.
Exactly. AI-ready data means the metadata and access permissions are mathematically ironclad.
Which means data hygiene is no longer a boring IT chore. It is a critical security function. And if your enterprise data isn't ready and you don't provide a secure internal tool, you run straight back into the shadow AI crisis. And this time, it causes catastrophic data leaks. I hear leaders say, why don't we just block ChatGPT on the company firewall?
And the data emphatically prove that prohibition fails completely. LayerX analyzed enterprise network traffic in 2025. They found that 77% of employees who use AI actively paste company data into chatbots.
77% of users are exposing data.
Yes. And the critical vulnerability is that 82% of those copy-pastes are happening on unmanaged personal accounts. The employee realizes the firewall blocks the corporate network, so they just pull out their personal iPhone, tether their laptop to a hotspot, log into their personal free ChatGPT account, and paste the proprietary source code or client financials right into the prompt.
And the IT department has zero visibility into it.
None. Cyberhaven Labs found that less than 1% of employees cause about 80% of these data leak incidents.
So by trying to block the technology, you just drive it onto personal devices, where the tech companies absolutely are training their future models on your data. The guide argues the carrot beats the stick here. You must provide a sanctioned enterprise-grade license where the contract explicitly forbids the vendor from training on your inputs. If the employee has a safe, fast tool on their desktop, they won't use their phone.
Exactly. You pair that secure tool with a very short, unambiguous, never-share list-like client, personally identifiable information, PII, or unreleased financial results, and you monitor the perimeter.
Okay, so we've protected the input data. Let's look at the output. Can I legally and operationally trust the output of an LLM? Because hallucinations are still a massive issue.
The guide establishes a golden rule for output. Treat the AI as a brilliant, incredibly fast first draft and a completely terrible final authority.
Because the models are designed to be plausible, not necessarily truthful, they will confidently generate highly detailed, totally fabricated specifics if they don't know the answer. And the legal consequences of this are exploding.
They really are. The researcher Damien Charlatan tracks this globally. There are currently over 1,780 court decisions worldwide that involve hallucinated AI content.
That is wild.
Over 1,200 of those are in the United States alone. We are talking about lawyers submitting fabricated case law and corporations facing actual financial sanctions. Chief Justice John Roberts dedicated his year-end report to the issue, explicitly warning the legal profession that relying on AI requires extreme caution.
So the operational mandate is to scale your trust based on the stakes of the workflow. If the AI is summarizing a meeting you just attended, you can verify the output instantly. Use it freely. But if the output touches a customer, a legal contract, financial reporting, or physical safety, you must insert a named human owner who is responsible for verifying the final output. The courts have been utterly ruthless on this point. The AI hallucinated is not a valid legal defense for corporate negligence.
And that transition from hallucination to liability bridges us directly into the guardrails and risk management. We have to examine the attack surfaces that expand when you delegate cognitive processes to software.
The first risk highlighted in this section is genuinely terrifying. It involves Arup, a massive, highly sophisticated global engineering firm. They lost $25 million in a single incident. And the most shocking part of the case is that their cybersecurity perimeter held perfectly. No computer system was hacked.
The hack was purely psychological. It was a social engineering attack supercharged by generative AI.
Break down what happened.
The attackers used deepfake video synthesis and voice cloning to impersonate the company's chief financial officer and other executives. They orchestrated a live video conference call and ordered a finance employee in Hong Kong to authorize a massive, urgent wire transfer.
So the employee is sitting there looking at their actual boss's face on the screen, hearing their exact voice, and following standard instructions to send $25 million.
Exactly. Rob Gregg, ERP's CIO, spoke at the World Economic Forum and shattered the illusion that deepfakes are just a Hollywood problem. He noted that the technical barrier to clone a voice or synthesize a face is now functionally zero. If your executives have ever spoken on a podcast or appeared in a YouTube video, their biometric data is compromised.
So basically anyone in leadership is a target.
Yes. Gartner surveyed over 300 security leaders and found that a staggering 62% of organizations had experienced at least one deepfake attack in the past 12 months.
Deloitte is projecting that AI-enabled fraud losses will hit $40 billion globally by 2027. So, mechanically, how do you defend against this? If I cannot trust my own eyes and ears on a live video call with my CFO, what do I do?
You abandon technological defenses and rely on procedural friction. Sam Altman spoke at a Federal Reserve conference and explicitly warned that any financial institution still relying on voice print authentication is acting recklessly because the models have fully defeated voice biometrics. The only reliable defense is out-of-band verification.
Explain out-of-band verification in a daily workflow.
It means breaking the channel of communication. If you receive an urgent email, a phone call, or even a live video request from an executive demanding a change to vendor banking details or a wire transfer, you immediately hang up. You do not reply to the email.
Just cut contact.
You pick up a phone and call that executive back on a pre-established known internal phone number. You implement mandatory dual human approvals for any transfer over a certain threshold. You establish pre-agreed duress words or verification phrases for sensitive conversations. You had to deliberately design human friction back into the financial system.
Human friction as the ultimate firewall. I love that. Let's move from criminal liability to civil liability. The guide has a standard disclaimer that it is not providing legal advice, but it outlines several landmark cases that establish how the law views AI mistakes. Walk me through Moffat v. Air Canada.
This case is the foundational precedent for AI customer service liability. A customer interacted with a chatbot on Air Canada's official website regarding a bereavement fare. The chatbot, hallucinating, invented a completely fake refund policy and assured the customer they would get their money back.
And then they wouldn't pay.
When Air Canada refused to honor the hallucinated policy, the customer sued.
What was the airline's defense?
Air Canada attempted a fascinating legal maneuver. They essentially argued that the chatbot was a separate, independent entity responsible for its own actions, and that the airline should not be held liable for the machine's unprompted misrepresentations.
Did the tribunal buy that?
Not for a second. The tribunal called it a remarkable submission and ruled entirely in favor of the customer. They established that a company cannot use an AI interface as a liability shield. If you deploy the agent on your infrastructure, you own every single word it generates, as if your CEO said it themselves.
There's also a massive case in the U.S. regarding HR and hiring, right? Mobley v. Workday.
Yes, and it expands the liability circle. This involves discrimination claims alleging that the AI algorithms used to screen resumes systematically biased against certain demographics. A federal judge allowed the claims to proceed under an agency theory, which signals that the software vendors who build and sell the AI screening tools can face direct legal exposure for algorithmic bias.
But does that protect the company using it?
However, it absolutely does not absolve the enterprise that bought the tool. Anti-discrimination laws, consumer protection laws, basic negligence. They all map directly onto AI deployment.
Which sounds like a compliance nightmare, especially when you look at the regulatory map. If I am a CEO operating nationally in the United States, what laws do I actually have to comply with?
Currently, it is a chaotic, fragmented patchwork. There is no comprehensive federal AI statute in the U.S. The legislative action is entirely driven by the states. In 2025, all 50 states introduced AI legislation, and 38 states enacted roughly 100 different regulatory measures.
So if I have operations in Texas, California, and Colorado, I have to comply with 3 different frameworks?
At a minimum, California focuses heavily on transparency and safety testing. Texas passed the TREGA Act, focusing on government and critical infrastructure. Colorado actually passed a landmark AI Act, only to repeal and replace it in May 2026, with a narrower framework taking effect in 2027.
And the federal government?
To compound the chaos, a White House executive order established a federal task force that is actively challenging some of these state laws to prevent total market fragmentation.
And if you operate globally, you run headfirst into the European Union's AI Act, which does not mess around with penalties. The EU can levy fines up to 35 million euros, or 7% of a company's total global turnover, for prohibited AI practices.
Which is why Gartner predicts that by 2027, robust AI governance frameworks will become a mandatory requirement for doing business across sovereign borders.
But there is a psychological paradox here regarding governance. I hear executives complain if they implement strict AI governance, write endless policies, and set up guardrails, they are going to crush innovation. They feel like governance is the enemy of speed.
It is a logical assumption, but the data proves it is completely backwards. Dataiku, a major AI platform, analyzed enterprise deployments and found that clear, strict governance actually accelerates momentum.
Mechanically, why would red tape make you move faster?
Because of psychological safety. Grant Case, a chief data officer, explained that to move fast, human beings need to know exactly where the edges of the cliff are. If a company has no clear AI policy, employees operate in a state of continuous anxiety.
Because they don't want to mess up.
They don't know if uploading a PDF will get them fired, so they either hide their usage or they don't use the tool at all. When leadership publishes a clear, unambiguous list of permitted tools and restricted data, the fear evaporates. Guardrails create the safety required for aggressive experimentation.
That makes total sense. Let's touch quickly on copyright, because the guide covers the commercial use of AI-generated content. If my marketing team uses an AI image generator to create a brilliant campaign visual, do I own that image?
The U.S. Copyright Office, backed by federal courts, has drawn an incredibly hard line on this. Purely AI-generated material receives absolutely zero copyright protection in the United States.
Zero.
The Supreme Court declined to hear the appeal on Thalel v. Perlmutter in 2026, which legally cemented this doctrine. Simply writing a clever prompt does not make you a legal author.
So if I generate a logo with AI, my fiercest competitor could theoretically right-click, save it, and use it, and I would have no copyright claim.
Essentially, yes. Copyright protection only attaches to the substantial human contributions to a work. If you generate an image and then a human graphic designer spends 10 hours fundamentally altering the composition, adding proprietary elements, and transforming the piece, that human arrangement can be copyrighted. But you must meticulously document the human workflow to prove it.
Okay, we are moving into the final section of the deep dive, the executive playbook. We have mapped the technological frontier, the talent psychology, the deployment mechanics, and the legal minefield. Now we need to zoom all the way out to the macroeconomic climate and then zoom all the way into the CEO's personal daily schedule.
The guide forces leaders to look at the macro risks first. We discussed the ball early on, but what happens if the capital expenditures suddenly dry up? The Bank for International Settlements issued a stark warning.
What did they say?
Microsoft, Google, Meta, and Amazon are projected to spend a combined $700 billion on AI capital expenditures in 2026 alone. If the market suddenly demands immediate ROI and forces those giants to pull back, the abrupt reversal could expose massive vulnerabilities in the broader financial system.
But Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell pushed back on the systemic risk argument, right? He noted that unlike the dot-com era where companies had no revenue, today's tech giants are sitting on massive piles of actual cash flow.
True.
But for the listener, a leader of a non-tech business, your exposure to a tech crash is indirect. If the bubble pops, AI tools might actually get cheaper as vendors slash prices to survive, but broader credit will tighten. The strategic defense is to ensure your AI projects are entirely funded by their own operational ROI, not cheap debt.
Exactly. But the more immediate guaranteed macroeconomic impact is on pricing power and profit margins. And the guide points to the elite management consulting firms, McKinsey, BCG, Bain as the canary in the coal mine for the rest of the economy.
Mechanically, how is AI disrupting McKinsey?
It destroys the billable hour. Historically, if a client wanted a comprehensive market landscape analysis, a consulting firm would assign 6 junior analysts to spend 3 weeks reading reports, synthesizing data, and building a slide deck. They bill the client for hundreds of hours of cognitive labor.
And now?
Today, an agentic AI workflow can process the data, synthesize the insights, and draft the deck in 3 hours.
So if you bill by the hour, your revenue just evaporated.
Exactly. Which is why these firms are aggressively pivoting to outcome-based or value-based pricing. They charge for the strategic insight, not the time it took to generate it. And this exact dynamic is going to hit every single industry. AI compresses the cost of routine cognitive tasks, estimating, drafting, legal review, coding. In a competitive free market, those cost savings don't stay in the company's profit margin forever. They eventually get competed away and pass through to the consumer in the form of lower prices.
That is a profound economic shift. Early adopters enjoy a temporary golden age of margin expansion. They cut their internal costs using AI, but they keep their external prices the same. But the laggards, the 56% we talked about at the beginning, they face a permanent margin squeeze when the early adopters finally lower the market price.
The window where AI efficiencies remain captured as profit margin is likely measured in a few years, not decades. And this urgency is already manifesting violently in mergers and acquisitions.
The AI gap discount. EY reported that corporate buyers are heavily penalizing sellers who lack AI maturity. If a private equity firm is looking to acquire your company, their due diligence team will assess your data hygiene and your workflow automation.
Right.
If your data is a mess and your processes are entirely manual, the buyer calculates the capital required to modernize your infrastructure, and they subtract that directly from their offer price.
Global M&A hit $1.6 trillion in the first half of 2026. If you are a founder or an owner eyeing an exit in the next 3 to 5 years, the valuation multiple you achieve by documenting a clean, AI-driven margin expansion will drastically exceed the daily cash flow benefits. AI maturity is now a core metric of enterprise valuation.
So how does a leader actually drive this transformation? What is the personal mandate for the CEO? Because Eric Kutcher at McKinsey calls this the CEO legacy moment. He says AI adoption is 80% business transformation and only 20% technology deployment.
Which means it cannot be delegated. A chief information officer can buy the software, But a CIO rarely has the political capital to force a recalcitrant VP of sales to fundamentally redesign how their team interacts with clients. Only the CEO can mandate cross-functional workflow destruction and rebuilding. Only the CEO can establish the psychological safety required to bring shadow AI into the light.
But the guide highlights a specific behavior required from the CEO that I think most leaders try to avoid. To lead this, the CEO actually has to use the frontier models personally every single day for mundane, boring tasks.
It is non-negotiable. Look at the anecdotal evidence in the guide. Tim Cook uses it to summarize his immense email volume. Ryan Roslansky, the CEO of LinkedIn, uses it to draft internal messaging. Sam Altman explicitly states he uses his own models in incredibly boring, routine ways. Jensen Huang uses it as a research tutor.
But why? A CEO's time is incredibly valuable. Why shouldn't they just have their chief of staff use the AI and brief them on the results?
Because you cannot manage a cognitive shift of this magnitude through a proxy. Using the tool daily is the only way to build a calibrated physical intuition for the latent space, what the model is brilliant at and where it confidently hallucinates. If a leader lacks that intuition, they make binary mistakes.
Like what?
They either underinvest because a pilot failed and they assume the tech is overhyped, or they overinvest in a reckless deployment because they watched a slick vendor demo and don't understand the hallucination risks.
Continuous learning is the antidote to strategic paralysis. And the data backs this up. BCG found that leaders who spend 8 or more hours a week personally building their AI capability and experimenting with workflows are disproportionately likely to lead companies that land in the top 15% of value generation.
8 hours a week is a massive allocation of executive time, but it proves that fluency precedes strategy.
To bring this entirely down to earth, the guide concludes with a Monday morning playbook. It is 4 immediate, practical steps that a leader can take the second this audio finishes. Let's walk through them.
Step 1. Use a frontier AI tool personally this week. Pick Claude, ChatGPT, or Gemini. Use it to prep for a board meeting, summarize a financial document, or draft a difficult email. Build your own intuition.
Okay, what's step 2?
Step 2. Pick one and only one high-friction, highly measurable workflow in your business. Assign a named line manager to own it. Rigorously measure the pre-AI baseline and execute a tight 30 to 60-day pilot. Do not try to boil the ocean.
Step 3 involves the guardrails.
Yes. Establish the 2 critical guardrails immediately. Publish a simple, one-page acceptable use policy so your employees know what data they can safely use, and implement strict, out-of-band wire verification procedures to insulate your balance sheet from deepfake fraud.
And the final step.
Step 4. Communicate explicitly to your entire organization that AI is a tool for leverage and growth, not a mechanism for mass layoffs. Bring the shadow usage out into the light.
Because the clock is running out on the early adopter advantage. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce reports that 58% of U.S. small businesses are already utilizing generative AI in some capacity. The real risk to your business isn't moving too early and making a small mistake.
Right.
The catastrophic risk is getting stuck in pilot purgatory, paralyzed by the noise, while your competitors quietly rewire their margins and permanently lower the market price.
The final quote in the guide from Justin White captures the required mindset perfectly. Disruptors don't wait for certainty. The brightest minds in the world agree on almost nothing regarding the timeline of AGI or the exact architectural limits of the models. But they agree on everything regarding the economic direction. The cognitive capabilities are real, they are scaling rapidly, and the window to capture the margin premium is open right now.
And that leaves us with a final, provocative thought for you to mull over as you rethink your own Monday morning strategy.
Let's hear it.
If this technology is rapidly becoming commoditized, if anyone with a credit card can buy a brilliant, tireless cognitive engine in a data center for $20 a month, and the majority of businesses are already doing exactly that, then very soon, raw intelligence is no longer a competitive advantage. It is just the new baseline. It becomes electricity.
It's a sobering thought.
Once every single company in your industry has the exact same access to infinite, cheap, flawless cognitive reasoning, what becomes your true differentiator? It might just be the things an algorithm can never replicate. Deep, sustained human trust, absolute moral and legal accountability, and flawless physical execution in the real world.
Yeah, an AI agent can draft the perfect architectural blueprint in 3 seconds, and it can optimize the supply chain math flawlessly. But it cannot look a terrified client in the eye, shake their hand, and promise them that the foundation will hold.
Look closely at your diagnostic muddy waters. The strategic X-ray might not be perfectly sharp yet, but the fractures in the old way of doing business are undeniable. The cure isn't waiting for the picture to sharpen. It's redesigning the workflow before the bone sets wrong. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you next time.